Welcome to the Feel Good Wedding Podcast, a podcast by Polka Dot Wedding. My name is Dorothy and I'm your host today. I'm the founder and editor of Polka Dot Wedding and I'm obsessed with wedding. But when I say obsessed, I'm not just obsessed with the pretty, the beautiful, the lovely flowers and the cake, because that stuff is what gets me going. But I also am really passionate and excited by stuff like diversity and inclusion in weddings and the lack of that. What it takes to have an accessible wedding. What it takes to have a wedding if you're hard of hearing. What it takes to have a wedding if you're not a cis couple. I really want to dive into this stuff, and that's part of why we're building the Feel Good Wedding podcast. Can't wait to take you along for the ride. The Polka Dot Wedding team is honoured to conduct our work on the land of the Boon Wurrung, Waiawarung, Eora and Kurungay people. We honour the traditional Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander custodians of the land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Hello and welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here today, and I'm so thrilled to chat with today's guest. Now, we love to talk about the aesthetic stuff at Polka Dot Wedding. We love to talk about the dresses. We love to talk about the flowers. We love to talk about all the things that you're probably scrolling and liking on Instagram. And it excites us as much as it excites you. But we also know that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get talked about quite as much as it should be, but is really, really important and crucial to your day. And one of those things is a wedding run sheet. Now, this is the thing that guides your entire day. It tells everyone what to do when. And so we invited one of our members, Vanessa Bragg of the Wedding and Event Creators, to lend her expertise. Now, Vanessa knows a thing or two about run sheets because she's planned hundreds, if not thousands of weddings through her business, the Wedding and Event Creators, plus her side business, the gelato bike. So who better to ask today for all the advice, including what happens when your wedding goes completely astray, who does the wedding run sheet, who is responsible for it, how much time you should allow for everything, than Vanessa. I think she's the perfect one to share her expertise today, and I can't wait for you to meet her. Hello, Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Now, before we start, we know you very well, having worked with you for many years at Polka Dot Wedding, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell me all about the Wedding and Event Creators.
Awesome, can do. So our business is Wedding Event Creators. So we based on the south coast of New South Wales here in Australia. We offer lots and lots of types of services, from sort of full wedding planning through to coordinations, styling, setup. We also have a big high range and do pack-up services, so like a clean-up service when people are hungover and don't want to have to do that the next day. Always a popular add-on. So we also have a little cute gelato bike which says yummy local gelato as well. So that's a bit of an add-on. So we, I guess, specialise in a lot of more DIY style weddings. So like we live in a fairly rural space, so there's a lot of marquee, barn, farm sort of weddings. So rather than your typical function centre, you know, those other sort of weddings, you need a lot more support. So I guess that's where we specialise in. I started a business about 10 years ago, but it's been very full on probably the last 5. And so I think we do about 400 weddings a year plus, which sounds insane when I say it out loud, but yeah, that's a lot of weddings. So about, you know, quite a few midweek on the weekends. It's pretty crazy. So, but yeah, we love it. Keeps us very busy.
And with 450 weddings, which is ridiculous.
I know.
For your team, you must know a lot about what we're talking about today, which is, as we said, very boring, but something that is absolutely critical to a wedding day, which is the wedding day run sheet. Can you tell me a little bit about what exactly is a wedding day run sheet and why is it so important on a wedding day?
Yes, awesome. So I love this topic. Not boring to me. I think it's so important and probably like the most important topic because it's the glue. The run sheet is the glue that holds all of that planning together on like the actual day. So essentially, I guess in a nutshell, like a wedding run sheet, it's basically a timeline for your wedding day, right? So it's a good run sheet should really outline all of those key timings, the tasks, who's actioning those. So for example, you might note things like 11 o'clock for setting up of the chairs. You might note that the band arrives at 1 o'clock. So it's all of the sort of setup timings through to the actual on the day things. So when the wedding gets underway, it's things like when the guests are arriving, your ceremony start time. So For myself as a wedding coordinator, it's the most important document that we use on the day. I've got it stuck in a little like bum bag or in my back pocket or something that we hold on to. It keeps track of everything, making sure that all of your suppliers and all those key people just know where they're supposed to be and when. I spent so much time planning, for months and months and years, your wedding day. It's just making sure that that's all executed correctly on the day. So, all of your supplies through to your makeup artist, your caterer, your band, they're all on the same page with those timings as well. So I find it really having a good quality run sheet, it stays true to timings on the day and make sure that no miscommunication and occurs. The timings don't blow out, so you miss that fun dance floor time. And really important for your special day to keep everything on track.
So I know a lot of photographers will say that they'll build it for you. And obviously, if you have a wedding planner, you would hope that would be part of their service, that they would build the run sheet for you. But who ultimately is responsible? If I'm engaged and want to plan my wedding, who's responsible for the wedding run sheet and who do I need to talk to when I'm building it?
Yep. Great question. So I do find that sometimes a lot of the suppliers do have their own what I call mini run sheets, right? So yes, a photographer, maybe a caterer's got like a little, they call it an event order. So they will create their own, but when you actually delve into that and look at that, it's very specific to that supplier only. So it's not showing a holistic run sheet of the day. It doesn't have every other supplier noted in there. It doesn't have the stylist set up time. It doesn't have exactly when the cake's going to be served or when, certain timings are. It might just have a very general overview, ceremony this time, dinner this time. So it's just real basic and it's only relating to them because they've got their own systems and processes, I suppose. So for us, like when we're, say, coordinating, we actually create that run sheet for you. So if you've got a wedding coordinator or a planner, even if you're at a function centre, maybe you've got like a venue manager, I find that they're generally the person in charge of the what I call master run sheet and keeping track of all of those suppliers on the day. I do find a good tip as well. Say you don't have any of those people, you're doing more of a DIY wedding where you're doing everything yourself. When you do create your own run sheet, a really good tip is just as well to print multiple copies on the day and hand them out to all of those suppliers just so that everyone's got that one central run sheet that they're working off. So whether that's your caterer, bar, like your MC, musician, that sort of a key family member that's helping you on the day, I think that's a really good tip is just making sure that they've all got that one run sheet in printed form so everyone's got the most updated copy as well. Yep.
That's a really good idea because you don't want to be trying to navigate telling everyone where they should be.
Yes. And it just makes sure they might have their own personalised ones, like you mentioned, a photographer or something, but it's just bringing it back to making sure all the other little details that are the in-between moments aren't missed. When everyone's just swept up in the day, it's so easy for timings and things to blow out or a miscommunication because no one's looking each step ahead at that run sheet. So, yeah.
Yeah. So how long before the wedding should I look at building my wedding run sheet?
Yeah, cool. So for us, we create our run sheets about 10 weeks before the wedding. You can do that anytime. So like you could create what I call just a general, I guess, really base draft one at any point that's got your main timings in there. But I find any earlier, you just don't have all that information to fill in the gaps with all the nitty-gritty details. So I find we create ours about 10 weeks before the wedding. We then email that out to suppliers about 5 weeks before the wedding. Again, any earlier than that, they're not ready to lock in arrival times and ready to look at that because they're already in other weddings headspace, so sort of too early. Anything too late, 2 weeks before is just too late because you don't have time to then gain their feedback, finalise, follow up with your suppliers. So I think sending it to your suppliers about 5-6 weeks before the wedding and creating a really tight run sheet about 10 weeks before is a really good time guide.
I was about to ask you whether I should send it to my suppliers once I've got my draft.
What we actually do is, so we have a template, right? And we put in each supplier, but then leave a gap on the left side of the time for them. So we've got all the other timings we're pretty comfortable. We know the ceremony time and when we want cake cutting and things like that. But say there's a florist arrival time, a caterer arrival time, band arrival time, we actually leave that blank. So it definitely is up to that supplier or vendor to dictate when they want to arrive. Of course, they know best when they need to arrive to set up and do their job. But sometimes we'll slot in templated timings. Again, because we've got a lot of experience, I know a lot of certain suppliers arrive, the bar arrives 1 hour pre-service time. So we sort of know timings and we ask them to check. But I think if you're doing it by yourself, to avoid any confusion, leave it blank and then you'll know easily who you haven't heard from. If you still see that slot blank, you haven't heard back from your florist for their time. So it's a good way to check in as well to make sure that you've crossed your I's, dotted T's, etc.
So we have a really great example of this because you've written a blog post that for us on Polka Dot Wedding that it talks all about a run sheet. So you've got a layout there of how to build it. But can you talk to the listeners of the podcast about how do we start building this? What should be included? How do we lay it out?
Yep, sure. So I find like for us, we have a template that I was referencing before that we sort of use as a base. If you're DIYing that, a really easy, I guess, starting point is to go online and just start Google searching lots of different run sheets and then pick apart pieces to create your own and create a base format that you're comfortable using. So you might like literally cut and paste elements from other run sheets that you've Google stalked online to then create your own base. So for us personally, we use literally just a Word document, but we do pop that into Google Drive folder. So we share that link with our couples and also with the vendors so that anytime any of us can jump in and see that live. I think that's really important rather than downloading, sending, editing. It's a really like long-winded way of getting to the same end game. So I find if we have it in Drive, everyone can access it and know that those edits that somebody has made are live. You can pare that back and sort of make sure that maybe if you don't want suppliers to edit direct, that's fine. You can prevent their access. But if it's myself and our couples, we can jump in and edit stuff as we go. So I think creating a template that you're comfortable using that's user-friendly for you. In terms of what's in a run sheet, for us, we laid out with timings on the left side, what the action is. So, for example, 6 p.m, prep reception space, and then who's managing that. So it might be coordinator or the particular supplier name. So that when that supplier looks down at the run sheet, they can clearly see their name and know where they're meant to be doing certain things. And then on the right side, I put very little details. So, real nitty-gritty details that we need to note. So it might be 2 p.m, hand out rose petal cones, the coordinator's doing that, and we're handing them out on guest arrival. So it's like everything's very, very neat in box template form. Yeah.
So the nitty-gritty part, which is we know weddings go over, everything goes over, and the things that we don't take into account, like the congratulations hugs, are never taken into account in the timelines that I often sort of see couples who haven't had the experience and don't have the knowledge do. So how much time should we allow for this basic stuff like the getting ready, the ceremony, the congratulations, all that stuff? Because it's so hard to come up with that when you haven't been through it before.
Yes, and biggest tip is overestimate your time. Everybody forgets the midway time in between all those things. And so they bump things so tight, then it's unrealistic. And then there's that panic of we're running over when if you just leave yourself that really flexible buffer time in between those formalities, I find that it's very true to time your run sheet. But in terms of general timings, every wedding, of course, is different. But most ceremonies I find we do typically like not church ceremonies, but civil ceremonies go for about 30 minutes. So, you allow 40 minutes because there's a congratulations at the end and, the general chit chat and things like that. I find with photos, so like wedding party photos typically go for about an hour or so. It depends, of course, if your photographer's taking you offsite or onsite, or maybe the couple's like, we just want a real quick 30-minute thing. I'm not interested in photos. Other sort of things that you might want to include in the run sheet are things like a group shot after your ceremony. So the big group photo might be family portraits. Another really good tip for family portraits are create a shot list to streamline that really boring, awkward time where like, where's Aunt Beryl? Where's Uncle Joe? Like no one can find everyone and you want the certain photos. I find like if you have a shot list, so photos of exactly who you want and a helpful family member that can gather those people, that quickens that process up. You might also duck away for like little sunset photos during the reception. That's like maybe 15 minutes or so. In terms of speeches, that's something I think that's really important, again, to be quite realistic for. I find if you ask your speakers to do maybe a 3-minute max limit, so you don't get someone rambling on for 45 minutes and just ruining the vibe. So give them a time limit so that, it doesn't go for too long, but actually allocate 10 minutes per speech. That's what we do in our run sheet. So we allow for that time where people get up, clap, walk over, fumble with their paper, do the actual speech, sit back down, get introduced. It's all that like random stuff in between that can blow out. So 10 minutes per speech is a good guide. The other thing is we often cluster formalities a little bit. So you might have like your cake cutting that rolls into a first dance, or speeches that roll into the cake cutting or something, so that you're not sort of like getting everybody up and your attention and then it only goes for 5 minutes and they sit back down, then drawing their attention again. If you cluster some of their formalities and group them, I just find that it sort of flows a lot better. So yeah, things like your cake cutting and first dance, you only need to allow about 5 minutes for those. They're pretty quick formalities, and cutting a cake is only a couple of quick snaps. So yeah, I think that's a couple of brief overviews of timings, but yeah, I think just being a little bit more realistic, it's better to just add those extra 5-10 minutes in rather than finding that like the main meals are getting cold because your speech has ran over.
Yeah. Are there things that we do on a wedding day, so like first looks or even getting married in winter with sunset being so much earlier compared to everything else, that would really change that timeline that you've just suggested?
So definitely, winter and summer, I find they're very different timings. So at the moment, we're into winter weddings, so I'm finding a lot of our ceremonies are like around that 1:30, 2:30 mark. And then summer weddings are more like the 3 or 4 p.m. because it's too hot earlier in the day and that you get much more daytime light. I'm finding with our winter weddings, people are cold and a little bit antsy to get inside and warm by like 5:30, whereas summer, they're happy to just have a champers outside and enjoy the sunlight much later. So I definitely think be very mindful of your seasons and your guest comfort, whether it's heat or coldness when you're creating that run sheet as well. Definitely first looks quite a popular thing at the moment. So you just need to be mindful of that when you're working out your like photographer timings and makeup and hair timings, because you're going to need to be ready a lot earlier. So it's really just sort of whatever timings you're popping in, being 2 steps ahead of looking in and around what's happening around that time to be realistic, I guess, as well.
Yeah. And I know we sort of touched slightly on this earlier, but if a vendor is already coming to me and saying, well, I've got a run sheet for you, you don't need to create one, would you still suggest that I do one and, align everything all into one and make my own, or would you suggest I leave it with everyone else?
Yeah, so definitely create your own master run sheet because as I mentioned, I think those are more customised to their own specific vendor needs. So they're very specific to their timing. So I find they'll be, we might have 50 line items in our run sheet and they've got 4. It's just the base timing. So they have their own processes and systems, that supplier that, they're working towards. And so the other biggest tip I would have for that is, and I've had this happen before where supplier, like a photographer's got their own run sheet but not bothered to check ours or whatever. So I think if your supplier does give you one, just take that little extra step of cross-referencing that their run sheet timings marry up with yours, because you wouldn't want them to have slotted in the wrong ceremony time or main meals time or something. So cross-referencing and doing your due diligence in that regard, I think, is important. But I highly recommend doing your own run sheet that is that holistic wedding approach. Yeah.
But I presume the one situation where that wouldn't apply and I could get away with not doing my own is when I've hired an external, not a venue coordinator, but an external wedding planner who's hopefully doing that for me.
Yes, we will definitely cross-reference that and make sure that they're ticked off neatly, that they've given us the correct timing and that we've matched up any of their timings with ours. But definitely, if we're doing that, we'll certainly be monitoring that.
Another point for the mental load of wedding planners, taking it off the couple.
That's totally true.
So I have my run sheet and I've done it all out and everything. What's next? What do I do with it on the day? Because as the couple, I don't want to be going, oh my gosh, it's 2:00. I'm supposed to be here. Like I want to pass that off to someone. So what do I do with the timings and all that kind of thing on the day?
Sure. So I think by that point if you've got a venue manager or like a wedding coordinator running the day, you shouldn't have to worry about a thing. By this point, all of the timings we know about. And then our role on the day as a coordinator is just staying 1 or 2 steps ahead of the game, making sure everyone's arriving at the right time. So for us, like a typical day for us would be we setting things up, but we're also monitoring that run sheet. Sort of it gets to 20 past 10 and that florist was meant to arrive at 10 o'clock. I start to go, where are they? What's going on? And then I might need to be checking in with that supplier and they're just a bit late or they've gone to the wrong venue or some crazy thing, then we're managing all of that without you knowing. But I find that it's just keeping everything on track in terms of the arrivals. And then once the day's underway, it's just keeping everybody moving from one space to the other and communicated with. So, for example, if your reception's going, the speeches are on, they're running a bit over, we're going between each supplier and letting them know that that's happening. So I'm going to the caterer and letting them know the speeches are about 15 minutes over so they can then keep the mains warm or communicate with their serving crew that, right, we're ready to go in 10 minutes and be ready, action station sort of thing. So I find it's just really communicating and having all parties like cohesive, I guess, as well, rather than just working alone and not knowing what's going on. The same with, like, say you have speeches coming up. Before we cue a speech, what do we need to do before that? We need to make sure people have their glasses topped up, ready for a toast. Has the dad done his wee? Is he ready to come back in and do his speech? Has he got his actual speech or has he left it in the room or something? So it's like, what do I need to be able to manage that? So I think that's a beauty, without sounding like a sales act, of having a good quality coordinator. And look, those things may flow okay if you are DIYing, but if you are, I find a lot of that role will probably fall back onto your MC, who then just needs to really make sure they're on top of that rather than drunk and just doing like the weird, speech moments. Yeah. I think it's just important to look at a couple of steps ahead and just keep liaising with everybody to keep those timings on track. But there's no point in having a run sheet if nobody's then actioning that on the day. And the worst case scenario is the timing gets so out of whack and so no one's like tightening all the timings up that then you have no dance floor time. That's probably the most important thing for our couples. They want to have heaps of time and heaps of fun on that dance floor. So the ultimate goal is to, behind the scenes, keep it all tight and together the best that we can. It is a wedding, but so that they do have that dance floor time, which they want.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. Is I know that if you're not having a wedding planner, I know that with the reception, the MC can really hold that timeline close and keep things running smoothly. But what would you suggest if you're not having a wedding planner for the rest of the day? Would you suggest a wedding party member or a friend? Or, I don't recommend ever the couple doing it themselves, I suppose, because I feel like it's so stressful.
Yes, I think the MC, often their role doesn't start, in my eyes, to that reception sort of start time, but normally most MCs are like a family member or friend at the moment, like it's Uncle Joe or whoever. There's not many that it's a professional MC. If it was a professional MC, that might be your DJ, right, that's toggling as doing the microphone parts. They're professional, they know what they're doing. They'll often sort of add on that extra role of liaising with your suppliers included in what they do. But yeah, typically if you don't have somebody that's an actual supplier in that role, it's just making sure that you've communicated with your MC what your expectations are of them. Yeah. So, some of them I've seen it all. I've seen some that are very, very like really great OCD tendencies that want to keep the timing on track, want to have a really strong role, and other people that just want to have fun and thought they were just meant to introduce people when they were prompted. So, yeah, making sure that you're clear on what their role is, because, yeah, if we're not there, a coordinator's not there, you definitely need somebody there doing it. Sometimes a good quality caterer will have a front of house manager that sort of has to step into that a little bit more closely if there's nobody else doing it. So you might find it sort of between your MC, your DJ and your caterer, sort of comes to the middle ground and works fine. But yeah, I think you should allocate somebody, and obviously try not to make it mum or like a really important person, because they're just going to be so in their headspace thinking about it and taking on that responsibility that they actually don't enjoy the day and get really stressed, because it's also, for a family member or friend, it's very personal. For us, it's like we got a bit more of a business professional head on, so it's sort of, we're not as close to it and emotional as like a family member would be as well. And obviously there's a level of experience that they don't have to.
Do you think then the most important part of the run sheet is that reception timeline? Like everything, obviously it's important for the pre-reception stuff, but reception's often always 6 o'clock start, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. Is it more important then than the reception run to time than perhaps the getting ready, and if you run a little bit over with that kind of stuff?
I think so. I think you can sometimes make up that time by shortening a smidge that like canapé cocktail hour. So if your ceremony ran over, a lot of those things you can't control. So I find even if the makeup and hair artist has got the wedding squad, ready to go, perfect timing, all it takes is like they've left a bride or someone has left a bouquet in the car, or they're, fluffing around getting photos for too long. Like there's so many random elements that just easily 15, 20, 30 minutes start to blow out. So I find, and those photos that I was mentioning before, the direct family photos, that's again another moment that time gets away. So I find you can, even if you're a bit delayed with ceremony formalities, you gain that time back and reset for reception because you can sort of massage the canapé cocktail hour timings. And yeah, but I think probably the most important thing is the food timing. They can't just keep 120 plates of food hot because your speeches went over for 25 minutes. So I think giving yourself way more extra time and around that dinner time to make sure that runs perfect, and the rest doesn't matter as much, if that makes sense, because it's just geared by our own. We made 8 p.m. as the cake cutting. That's not a big deal. We can move it to 8:20 or something. Yeah. So I think like as long as the food timing, you keep that as close to time that you can, the rest you can adjust. And look, you have to be like super fluid and flexible on the day and just roll with things that happen as well. Like you just have to roll with it. And if something's late, you sometimes have to off the cuff just go, right, we're going to bump that speech till later because we don't want the mains to be late. So you might need to shuffle and adjust things sometimes and be a little bit flexible with that as well. So be open to that.
Well, you've just basically answered my last question, which was, what do I do if it all goes out of whack, if the hair and makeup artist is late for some reason, or I've forgotten my bouquet, or Dad's forgotten his suit pants, or whatever it is? What do I do if my timeline has completely gone out of whack and I'm overwhelmed and about to have a panic attack because, oh, my gosh.
Take a breath and roll with it. Like seriously, just calm down, take a breath, and just be flexible if that happens. So nothing ever goes to perfect. We do 400 and something weddings a year. I'm telling you, even with a professional there, if for peace of mind for you, it's never going to run perfect to timing because there's so many random elements and there's so many people. And, sometimes we'll find the couple are like, we just want to have a cute little 10 minutes together. Cool, let's add that in. And we just have to go with things, So like you just have to be very, very flexible with that. A run sheet is a guide only. It's not to the minute. We're not in the military, like it's a guide. So I feel like, definitely exactly like you've mentioned. I've been in so many of those situations have happened to me on a regular occasion. Let's throw the timings off, and it's perfectly normal. It's fine. That's part of the fun of it, is that it doesn't have to be all perfect. So be prepared to rejig things, recognise it's not the end of the world, and then, maybe when you arrive back late from like bridal party photos or something, you might need to adjust the speeches a bit later. I'll bump the cake cutting a bit further on. So that's fine. So that's probably going to happen, 50% of weddings. And it's not a big deal. It's sometimes you don't even know it's happened. Like we'll quietly come up and be like, we just moved that little speech. Oh yeah, no worries. Cool. Boom. It's all good. So yeah.
I feel like that's golden advice, that the wedding run sheet is a guide and not like has to happen, because I keep thinking, oh gosh, okay, it's 2:00, I'm not here, I'm not there. And I would get very panicked because that's the kind of person I am. So it's really good to know that it's just a guide and it's just supposed to help us and not like, has to be this time.
If you think it's got to be like, you'll always feel like you're late and that's not running correctly. If you sort of, it should definitely be a guide only. Yes, totally.
Wonderful. You shared so much amazing advice for us. Do you have any last tips about run sheets for us today?
I think I could talk on this topic for so long. It's really important to me. I feel like I'm super passionate about run sheets. I think we probably create about like 15 a week at the moment, and I feel like every single one we find a new way of doing things. So a couple of little final tips, I guess you'd say, would be remember you can customize it to your own. You don't have to do what everybody has always done in terms of the layout or timing. So if you want to have your cake cutting after your ceremony, we've done that. Do that. You want to have cake at the wedding party photos, do that. You don't have to do it exactly neatly where everybody's traditionally done it. So I think I'm loving seeing at the moment everybody's just going not against traditions, but they're more personalising the timeline to suit what they actually want to do. So my advice would be sit down as a couple and be like, what have we seen at weddings or that we've attended that we loved or really didn't like? And then create a run sheet around that. That would be my biggest tip, is that I just think that you don't have to go against the natural progression of how things used to go. We've had first dances on entry. So like you do your wedding party entry, and that leads into the first dance and cake cutting, whereas traditionally that's at the end of the evening because they wanted it over and done with and wanted that buzz of a first dance to kick things off in their reception. So, yeah, definitely play around with like moving things around, thinking outside the box a little bit with your timings, and I think you're just going to create a very personalised, beautiful run sheet that reflects both of you as a couple.
That sounds perfect and such really good advice on something that I do admit it's not boring. It's just something that you don't really want to spend a lot of thought process on. It's much more fun to do flowers.
Styling, I know.
So, but it's so critical and it's such an important part of the day. So I'm really thrilled that we were able to use your expertise to talk on it today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved it, we have all the goodies for you. We have all Vanessa's links, including how to book her, and a full written transcript of today's episode over on polkadotwedding.com/podcast. We've also built a wedding day run sheet template that you can purchase in our shop. We've linked that over there too. Our directory is full of vendors like Vanessa because we wholeheartedly believe that you should be able to find vendors that suit you and your style and not us and our rules. So our wedding directory is not invitation only. In fact, we welcome wedding vendors from all price points, all styles, all locations, and all everything. We think they're all pretty amazing. We stand behind them wholeheartedly and we love each and every one of them. But you can find them all over on our website as well. We would love to hear your feedback on today's episode. We'd love your subscriptions, your ratings, your reviews, all of the above. It really helps new podcasts like us get on our feet, and we would love to know a little bit more about who's listening. We can't wait to see what you have to say, and we can't wait to share more of us and our stories with you.